Hi Year 4, hope you're all okay. I realise I've forgotten to sort chapter 19, so here I am going to find out what happened to Cass when she arrives at the midnight sun. So, I hope it's not giving too much away to tell you that, only 2 days later, the midnight sun would be devoured by fire. How and why it was set on fire, and who, if anyone, was burned to a crisp, and whether or not the smell of sulphur was in the air. These are questions that will have to wait. In the meantime, the midnight sun's fiery fate frees me to describe it in detail. Because it is gone, you can no longer find it, no matter how good your information. So many subjects you study in school prove unnecessary in life. For maths there is always a calculator, for English there is always spell check, for history there is always an encyclopedia. Why should you hold so much knowledge in your head when it's stored right in front of you? But there is one subject that comes in handy time after time. I'm thinking, of course, about Egyptology. To name just one example, a thorough understanding of the mummification process is indispensable whether you are dispatching an enemy or preserving a friend or simply bandaging a head injury. More to the point, if you are familiar with the layout of temples from Egypt's Middle Kingdom, roughly 2000 to 1600 BC, then you already have a sense of what the midnight sun looked like. In particular, the spa was an almost exact replica of a little-known temple to the Egyptian god Thoth. A temple built over the grave of an unnamed pharaoh and accessible only by a 3-day camel ride through the desert. Cass was sadly ignorant of the finer points of Egyptian architecture. She knew enough, though, to recognise a pyramid when she saw one. Passing through the midnight sun's massive gates, she was temporarily blinded by the blazing light. But once her eyes adjusted, she could see a mid-sized, by Egyptian standards, pyramid standing in the precise centre of the spa grounds. Perched on top of the pyramid was something that would have astonished even the most seasoned Egyptian explorer. It was a lantern, but much more than a lantern. A perfect orb. It resembled nothing so much as a rising sun. Inside, fire danced every which way, as if it fuelled not by electricity or gas, but rather some unknown supernatural source. Although the fire appeared gold at first glance, a longer look revealed a kaleidoscope of colours in the flames. It was this lantern that Cass had seen earlier peeking over the mountains. Now, as the limousine door was opened for her, the lantern was so close she had to shield her eyes despite the fact that she was wearing sunglasses. Had she had a sudden change of heart and decided to make a run for it, the glare would have dissuaded her. Anyone in the vicinity could be seen as clearly as if a spotlight was shining directly upon her. It's just like a prison, Cass thought. A large gloved hand helped her out of the vehicle. She assumed the hand belonged to Daisy until she looked up and saw Dr. L's too handsome face smiling down at her, his silver hair glowing unnaturally in the light of the lantern. She stifled a gasp, squeezing her backpack tight in her arms. This was the moment of truth. Would he recognise her? Miss Skelton, welcome to the Midnight Sun. I am Dr. L, he said smoothly, just as if he were meeting her for the first time. Miss Morvay regrets she cannot greet you herself. She keeps to a very strict bedtime. But she's asked me to extend you every courtesy in her place. Cass nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. The light was making her dizzy, or was it nerves? Behind her, the limousine quietly pulled away. There was no going back. I know, it's bright here, but you'll get used to it, said Dr. L, tilting his head in the direction of the pyramid. That lantern was bought by a ship from Egypt many years ago, but the flame inside had already been burning for thousands of years before that. Legend has it started with a fireball that fell from the sun. Like a meteor? Cass managed to ask. Exactly. Because the flame never dies, we call it the midnight sun. It's like a sun that never sets. But you must be very tired. He gestured towards a freckled-faced young man in a white tunic, and yet another pair of white gloves, standing silently next to a stone table. This is Owen, your personal butler. He will escort you to your room. Nice to meet you, Owen stuttered. He smiled shyly. Cass breathed a silent sigh of relief. Owen, at least, was not very intimidating. But first, a small formality. said Dr. L. His identifiably unidentifiable accent was especially strong when he pronounced the word formality. "Do you need me to pay?" asked Cass, ready to hand over a credit card her mother had given her. Dr. L chuckled. "We'll worry about that later. It's just we have to look through all our guests' baggage when they arrive." "You want to look in my backpack?" Cass asked, alarmed. The Midnight Sun is a place of healing, and we insist that nothing contaminate the atmosphere. Sugar, junk food, firearms, that sort of thing. Cass reluctantly handed her backpack to Owen, who started removing items for Dr. L's inspection. Cass hoped desperately that nothing would reveal who she was. "I see you've come prepared," said Dr. L dryly as Owen held up Cass's flashlight and binoculars and other survivalist gear. "What's that? A space blanket? I think you'll find the bedding here is quite ample, but of course one never knows. I must say, you seem a much more independent sort than your sisters." "My sisters? I mean, you know them," Cass corrected herself, flustered. "Certainly, they've been here several times. Miss Morvay is very fond of them, but you must know that." He smiled blandly. "Yeah, I knew that," said Cass quickly, her palms sweating. "That's why I'm here." "Normally we don't encourage our guests to bring camping equipment, but we'll make an exception tonight." He nodded for Owen to return the backpack. "However, I'm afraid I will have to ask for your cell phone," Dr. L added. "Hopefully you'll appreciate the opportunity for silence and meditation." Cass froze. She'd always hated silence and meditation, but that wasn't the problem. Her phone was the only thing linking her to the outside. If the worst should happen, she might at least use it to send her mother a message or a picture of herself waving goodbye. Cass was about to say she hadn't brought a phone with her, but then she thought better of it. What self-respecting skeleton sister would leave home without one? The danger of blowing her cover was too great to risk. She reached into her pocket and handed over a phone. Goodbye, she thought, although whether she was addressing the phone or her mother or the whole world, she couldn't have said. As Owen led her to her room, Cass tried to forget her fears and to concentrate on her surroundings. The midnight sun she saw spread out from the pyramid in a series of concentric circles. A wide reflecting pool dotted with lily pads and lotus blossoms surrounded the pyramid. A huge courtyard paved in sandstone surrounded the reflecting pool. And a series of low stone buildings fronted by columns surrounded the courtyard. Flowering vines, jasmine, honeysuckle and other more exotic varieties crept up the columns, filling the air with their scent and making the midnight sun seem all the more ancient, beautiful and secret. I say seem all more ancient, beautiful and secret because in reality the midnight sun was not ancient but merely old. The doings inside, as you shall soon see, were anything but beautiful. And lastly, now that I am writing about it, the midnight sun is somewhat less of a secret. While the lantern on the pyramid created the effect almost of daylight, the whole of the midnight sun seemed to be asleep. It was like coming across a remote village in the mid-afternoon and finding the inhabitants had fallen asleep under a spell. Behind one of these doors, Cass thought, Benjamin was being kept prisoner. Or would they keep him underground in some kind of labyrinth or dungeon? Perhaps he was underneath her feet at that very moment. Cass imagined a dark corridor lined with prison cells. Benjamin, Luciano and all the other children stolen by Miss Morvay, grasping the steel bars, pleading for help. Before she knew it, Cass was standing in her new room, and Owen was bidding her good night. "Can I get you before I go?" Needless to say, Cass had never had a butler before. She'd never even seen one before, except in the movies or on TV. Owen wasn't anything like a movie butler. First, he didn't wear a tuxedo. Second, he was too young. Owen was that age that is older than a kid but younger than a parent. Maybe the age of an uncle or a half-brother from your father's first marriage. You know, that age. Third, he didn't have an English accent or even speak properly, but that made it all the more difficult to know how to treat him. "I don't want anything," said Cass, trying her best to sound like a bossy heiress. "Go away now." Immediately, she felt like she'd overdone it. If she was too rude, she might make an enemy of Owen. "I mean, if that's okay," she added in a friendlier tone. "My shoes are still wet, and I just want to get out of them." Owen didn't seem to notice her tone, one way or the other. No. In the old days, they made the guests here sleep in wet socks." Wet socks? Why? Asked Cass, making a face. When you have cold feet, your blood circulates to warm them up, but they have other ways now, he said darkly. Before Cass could ask what he meant, he was out of the door. Moorish tiles, potted palms, a bed made to look like a bedroom, a Bedouin tent, and an arched window facing a pyramid. Her room could have been a palace bedroom in Giza. At another time, in other circumstances, Cass might have loved staying in a room like this. Now she could only regard the room with dread. It was the first hotel room she'd ever stayed in. She couldn't help fearing it would be the last. She assured herself that her disguise was intact. If Dr. Ella recognised her, he wouldn't have welcomed her so courteously. But it was no use. She lay on the bed, tensing every time she heard a sound. In her imagination, the hum of a pool filter was the churning of molten gold, and the rustle of leaves signalled the presence of angry monkeys coming back for their young. Her idea was to wait in her room until everyone at the spa had gone to sleep. Then she would sneak out and look for Benjamin. As the hours passed, she kept putting off the moment. Even after the pyramid's lantern had finally begun to dim, she told herself to wait a little longer, just to be safe. If you've ever slept anywhere other than your own bed home, then you know it's often difficult to fall asleep in a strange bed. However, it's equally difficult to stay awake after you've experienced one of the longest, scariest, and most exhausting days of your life. Cass fell asleep. She dreamed she was travelling in Egypt, searching for a fabled trove of buried treasure. A turbaned guide, who looked strangely like her butler Owen, led her into a massive, hulking pyramid. Inside, a dark tunnel coiled around and round, getting narrower and narrower and going deeper and deeper underground. Cass had to stoop, then crawl, then slither on her stomach. She had trouble breathing. She wanted to turn around, but she couldn't. She felt claustrophobic. She was afraid she would suffocate. Then finally, she saw it glittering in front of her. A giant, golden hamburger. A golden hamburger? The pyramid's innermost chamber was an underground fast food restaurant. She tried telling her guide no, that this wasn't right. She didn't want to go there. In order to make their hamburgers, large corporations raised and slaughtered so many cows that they became diseased and land was destroyed. Land that should have been used to grow grain and feed hungry people. It was an environmental agency. There was so much cow dung that the methane gases from the dung made the air smoggy. She knew all about it from a documentary she saw with her mum. If he'd just give her back her cell phone. If she could just call her mum. If only. Please let me out. Please. But Owen, her butler, her guide, wouldn't listen. The magic word had lost its power. Now chapter 20 is called And Now Back to Max Ernest. I wonder if Cass will be okay.